Hey guys, it's GS Luke, bringing you my preview for the 2021 Charles Schwab Challenge. This will be for the DraftKings PGA slate. We'll be going over the field, a course breakdown, some of the key stats for analysis this week, as well, of course, as my top 6 targets for DFS this week. Last week's PGA Championship was absolutely bonkers. I had the pleasure of being there, seeing Phil at age 50 take down that iconic championship, whatnot. Obviously, the mob swarming on 18 was pretty cool. The fan reaction was just sick. And I had a pretty good point of view, let's say, for that last shot. And I'm just going to play it. I'm not going to describe it really. You guys can let me know what you think. Pretty cool moment for sure, obviously. Something I will never forget. But yeah, this week we got the Charles Schwab. We got a bunch of contests here on DraftKings. Probably a lot of the casuals from last week that will play again. You know, they had their bankroll out there. They probably liked what they saw last week at the PGA. So I'm looking to take advantage this week, and this will be some advice to help you guys do so. So first of all, covering the field for this week's tournament, we have a invitational field of 121 players, so much less than what we're used to seeing, even typically for invitational fields that typically have about 134, 135 players. This week, the cut is going to be the top 65 in ties. So your typical cut line, we're going to see a lot more people, at least percentage-wise, through the cut than normal. Our defending champion is Daniel Berger. He won last year in a playoff against Colin Morakawa. And just to go over some of the headliners for this field, we have Jordan Spieth, Justin Thomas, Colin Morakawa, who I just mentioned, Daniel Berger, our defending champion. We also have some guys coming over from the PGA. Obviously, all those other guys played as well, but people like Patrick Reed, who played well on the weekend, defending champion Phil Mickelson, Abraham Ancer, Will Zalatoris, who actually ended up finishing top 10 with a really good weekend finish, Corey Connors, etc. So we have a lot of good players this year. Not quite as strong as last year. Last year we did see a major-esque field. We had a full 156-man field. But this year we go back to what we're used to seeing at the Charles Schwab. The course for this week's event is Colonial Country Club, one of the longest tour stops that we've had on the PGA Tour, being its 70th time being played. Only number 2 to Augusta National, obviously. It's located just outside of Fort Worth, Texas. We're looking at a par 70, 7,209 yards, so pretty average there with the length. It's designed by John Bremidis. Grass type is bent grass, so what we're used to seeing in Texas. And typically, cut pretty short, pretty fast. It actually tends to favor some of the worst putters. Some of the more aggressive guys tend to get a little bit lucky on weeks like this. We have below average green size of just 5,000 square feet on average. I would even say very small, so we're going to be emphasizing approach in around the green game this week. And we have 84 bunkers on site, which is a good amount. We're used to seeing a good amount of bunkers on the PGA Tour, but something of note is that there's not really a lot of water in play. It is in Texas. There are a few lakes, but there's not, a ton of lakes. There's not a ton of natural areas or anything like that. So a lot of the players you're not going to see a lot of, double, triple bogeys this week or anything like that. So that's the course breakdown. Now getting into my key stats for this week's event. The PGA Tour here has been here for 70 years, like I mentioned before. We have a ton of data here, a ton of past champions, just a lot of viewing of golf here at Colonial, which makes it one of the more recognizable tour stops that we have. So obviously we have a good idea of how this course plays. With that being said, the reason why it's part of this key stats section here is when you look at the stat model, no stat pops. The top stat we have of the major 4 statistical categories here is around the green, and that ranks number 38 out of 50 on tour. That's a very low correlation. It's essentially trivial at that point. Usually I don't even mention statistics that rank in, the 30s, 40s range. And for that reason this week, I just think it's worth noting that you pretty much have to have an all-around game. We saw it there at Pebble Beach, something I mentioned before. When no one stat really pops in a model, what that means is that you have to have everything. You're not going to be able to rely on your off the tee game or just your approach play or just your putting or whatnot to succeed at an event like this. You're going to have to do well from a shots gained total perspective, and you're going to see that in a lot of the players that I choose this week. With that being said, we are going to talk about some of the key stats that I will be weighing a little bit more this week than I would be just in a normal shots gained total model, just because we do have a little bit of a narrative in play here. I mean, we've seen it, in play before. Again, it's one of the longest tour stops that we've had. And just from the eye test, there's a few things that we know are going to be important this week at Colonial. Number 3 for the key stats this week, we have shots gained off the tee. That will be an emphasis of distance and accuracy on a golf course, and really looking for the combo of the two this week at Colonial. Most of the holes at Colonial do dogleg, either left or right, right to left. They don't prioritize one or the other. So you're really looking at lefties and righties having an equal advantage this week. But in general, you're going to have to be able to shape your shots and place them exactly where you want to. The rough here can get a little bit penal. They tend to just let it grow throughout the week. So, Thursday, Friday, it's probably not as big a deal, but Saturday, Sunday, it might start to become a little bit of a factor. And making sure you're in the short grass is going to be important. But the main reason putting yourself in the fairway is super important at Colonial is those small greens. You absolutely have to be able to control your spin to hold a lot of those small greens, and putting yourself in the short grass is mandatory at that point. Again, especially on, Saturday, Sunday, if that rough becomes a little bit penal, and I mean just a little bit, right? If it grows half an inch, it's really going to take a lot of spin off of those shots and make it impossible to hold those greens. So you're looking for guys that can, hit it out on the fairway, hit it a good way as well. Even though it's not a long course by any means, having that extra distance is always an X factor. And having players that are really long off the tee that can maybe even scale back a little bit is going to be good as well. At number 2, we have shots gained around the green. So like I said, we have very small greens in play at Colonial. And as a result, you're going to be missing way more than average when you're comparing it to other tour stops. Very similar to what we saw last week at Kiowa, very small greens, a lot of wind. You just absolutely have to be able to get up and down. You're probably going to see a score, winning score in the 15, 16 under range. Nothing in that 20, 25 under range like we saw at the Byron Nelson or anything like that. And as a result, keeping yourself in the tournament is going to be vital for you to separate yourself from the rest of the pack. We've seen that with winners here. We've seen, Kevin Na win, Jordan Spieth, etc., that are just short game wizards. And as a result, it's coming in at number 2. Our number 1 key stat this week, though, is shots gained approach. It's usually my number 1 stat when I do my analysis. It's a staple of my analysis, I would say. But when you have really small greens in play, we see this at Wyndham, we see it at Pebble Beach, and we see it here. It just you prioritizes those ball strikers. When you have a smaller target, the guys that hit it closer to the hole are obviously going to hit more greens. And as a result, I think there's 2 paths to winning this week. You have the around the green play. The guys that are going to get up and down. They're going to make their birdies when they can. And then you're going to have the guys that just don't miss any greens. The guys that are just on fire with their irons, that don't even have to rely on that short game. So I'm really looking for one or the other. A combination of the two, I guess, would be nice, but you're not really going to find that on tour. And that's why shots gained approach comes in at number 1. Now hopping into my top 6 golfers to target, my spend up for this week is going to be Colin Morakawa, a $10,500 golfer who lost in a playoff last year to Daniel Berger. But this year, I think he comes around, gets that win, and gets a little bit of retribution for that loss last year. Again, he played great last year. He's one of the best, if not the best, iron players in the world. And he just didn't put himself in a lot of trouble last year. As I mentioned before, you have those 2 paths of success. Either get yourself up and down every time or just don't miss a green. He chose the latter there. And that's essentially what Morikawa does week to week. He's number 2 on tour in shots gained approach, number 8 in shots gained off the tee. He's deadly accurate off the tee. And again, to be top 10 in off the tee, with a driver only going 310 yards, when a lot of guys are bombing at 320, 330, that just shows you how impressive he is with his accuracy. He's number 3 on tour in tee to green, combining those 2 stats, and number 5 in the field and off the tee. So he's one of the elite guys off the tee when you just narrow it down to this field. And overall, I think his floor is a top 10 this week. He just is an absolutely beast ball striker. He's probably going to be the best ball striker in this field, especially given the form coming in. The only problem you have with Morakawa is the putter. He can bleed. He doesn't really bleed strokes. He's somebody that's neutral. He gains from time to time. And when he gains, he wins golf tournaments. Again, he doesn't really have these, -4, -5 shots gained putting weeks. Even when he does, his ball striking usually makes up for it. And as a result, I think he's a very safe play with very high upside, very even likely upside to win this golf tournament. So that's why he's my spend up. My second man in is Will Zalatoris at $9,900. And I'm going to call him the poor man's Colin Morakawa this week. Willie Z provides a very similar mold, especially if he's going to succeed this week at Colonial. And just to give you some stats here on Willie Z, he's number one on tour, not just the field, number one on tour in shots gained approach. He's getting 0.37 strokes per round off the tee, which is excellent. That puts him in that top 10%. And he's been neutral this year around the green and putting, which is honestly impressive for a younger player, especially somebody that's more of a ball striking expert. So Will Zalatoris, if we're comparing him here to Morakawa, he's longer off the tee, but he's more than capable and he's more than willing to club down off the tee and to increase his accuracy. We saw that at the RBC Heritage. He had a lot of 3-irons off the tee, a lot of hybrids off the tee, and as a result, his accuracy for the week was fantastic. Obviously, Will Z is used to hitting the ball 10 to 15 feet from pins with his irons, so if you give him a 40, 50-yard fairway to hit, he's going to do it every single time. I expect him to be doing a lot of that this week at Colonial. He's a longer player that just doesn't need to hit driver unless it calls for it. There's obviously going to be holes. There's a drivable par 4. There's the par 5s, one on each side that he's going to have in play. But he will take out the big stick, and obviously it'll just help him even more on those holes. He'll have the elite length to take advantage of them. I think he's being a little bit overlooked as well. We're looking at his ownership number here early on Wednesday, and it's at 4.5%. Now, that's ridiculous for Will Zalatoris. We've been seeing him come in at 15, 20, even 30% ownership over these past few weeks at, frankly, tournaments where I don't think he even set up as well. He's probably like the 10th, 15th best play. This week, I have him as the second best play in the entire slate, only behind Morakawa, who's just otherworldly at this point. And as a result, I'm going to be very, very heavy on Will Zalatoris this week, and that 25 to 30% range. I'm going to have a lot of leverage on him. I may even go a little bit higher on it too. We'll just have to see how my lineups shake up a little bit later on the night. But again, I expect him to contend, and I very well could see him winning this week. Again, if he gets that hot putter, just like Morakawa. Something I forgot to mention with Will Zalatoris there is that he also loves the bent grass surface. So he's a Texas guy, grew up on the surface. That's the prominent grass surface that you find in Texas. But he's also done really well in the few tour stops he's had so far on bent grass. Obviously highlighted by the second place finish at the Masters. He's very comfortable on the surface. I think it makes a lot of sense as well if you look at the bent grass narrative. It's a faster moving surface. It tends to make some of the quote unquote bad putters a little bit better. And Will Zalatoris definitely isn't an elite putter by any means. So I definitely like that as well. For my bread and butter play this week, we have Billy Horschel, an $8,800 golfer who's in an absolute heater of late. Especially on the bent grass surface. We saw him do very well at the match play. We saw him do very well at the Valero, a few other Texas events as well, Byron Nelson. And he has 4 top 25s out of those last 5 starts. He also didn't miss a cut. The other event was just a middling performance after making a cut. But overall, Billy Horschel has shown a lot of fire over this last month and a half. We've also seen a lot of consistency, which isn't usually something that we associate with Billy Horschel. But if he's really starting to put together his game, start to show that floor a little bit, I'm definitely going to be on Billy Horschel a little bit more than I was in the past. Just to give you an idea of how his ball striking's been, and again, anytime we talk about a golfer showing consistency, 99% of the time it's because of their ball striking, right? It's because they figured something out with their swing. Putting's very volatile from week to week, or around the green game is extremely volatile from week to week. But we look at someone's golf swing, usually it's very repeatable. And if we look at those last 12 rounds, he's gained in 8 of his last 12 rounds on approach. He's also gained in 8 of his last 12 off the tee. And overall, in terms of ball striking, he's gained in 9 out of his 12, so in 75% of his rounds. Essentially what that means is that, when he's playing a golf tournament, he's gaining in 3 out of those 4 rounds, which is excellent. But of course, if he's able to go out and, put together 4 rounds consecutively, I think he goes out and wins a golf tournament. I think he wins in a emphatic fashion, just to say the least. He's an elite around the green player, elite putter, and he's showing that he can be elite with his ball striking from time to time. So I think it's just a matter of time. In the next month, we're going to see him put it together for those 4 rounds, and I'll definitely be invested in him until we see that. For my value play this week, we have Harold Varner III at $7,400. He's one of my favorite golfers to talk about just because of how well he statistically grades week to week. But he's one of the most all-around golfers in the world. He's gaining across all 4 major statistical categories for the year, which is very rare. Typically we only see that for, the top 10 golfers in the world. But when Varner is able to put it all together, we see fireworks. For proof of that, just look at his second place finish there at the RBC Heritage. We also saw him shoot a 63 here at just this golf course here at Colonial last year. And overall, he's somebody that I expect to get a win, either this year or next year. He's just somebody that pops and somebody that, is due for a win. Again, I really like that he gains in all 4 categories. He doesn't really have to rely on one of his skills to succeed from week to week. All he really needs is to put them all together on the same week. At the Honda, I followed him around. He was spraying the ball off the tee, but hitting all of his irons to 10 feet. When I was watching him at the Players, he was hitting every green, hitting every fairway and whatnot, but missing every single putt. It just seems to be, one thing one week, and then the next week it's something else. Even with that being said, he's put together a lot of good finishes. He put together a 19th place finish last year at this tournament. That was pretty much a major-esque field. So I look at that 19th place finish as a lot better than just a normal top 20. And at the price point, he gives you a lot of really good leverage, moving away from some of those higher-owned options. And I think he gives you even more upside than a lot of those options. Harold Varner III could very well go on and win this week. I would even put a bet in on him if I could. So that's why he's my value play this week. For my diamond in the rough, we have Luke List at $6,900, and he's coming in on an absolute heater. Pretty much just like Billy Horschel, but even more so. He has a 6th place finish at the Wells Fargo, a bunch of made cuts, and he's priced in that $6,000 range where most of the guys around him are scrubs and, guys that are missing a lot of cuts. Luke List just doesn't fit that bill. If we look at, List over his career, he's been an absolute ball striking machine. He ball strikes the heck out of the ball. His one major weakness has been the putter, though. He leaks strokes putting. He's not one of those guys that just loses, a stroke or two. He'll lose 5, 6, 7 strokes putting in a round. And of late, though, that's not been the problem for him. Luke List of late has been gaining 1 to 2 strokes per event. We saw him gain 3 at the Wells Fargo, and he contended. So Luke List is somebody that is surely team no putt. Somebody that ball strikes the heck out of it. But if he can ride that form of late with the putter, he's going to contend. This field isn't a major-esque like it was last year. Luke List is probably a top 5 ball striker in this field. And if the putter just doesn't leak this week, I absolutely love his floor. And I do think that if he has a good week putting, he could go out and win, just like somebody like Harold Varner. So I'll be riding that hot form with the putter, and especially if he's low-owned this week like it looks like he is right now. And lastly, my flyer pick this week is Adam Shank, coming in at $6,500. And yes, Shank. Hopefully he doesn't shank many balls this week, but he's quietly been producing of late. We've seen him make the cut in 4 of his last 5 starts. And we've also seen him produce 3 top 25 finishes along that stretch. That is something that nobody below $6,900 can say. I think Luke List is probably the next one up the board that can say something even remotely close to that. And statistically this year, Shank's been great. He's been very close to gaining across all 4 statistical categories. He does lose a little bit putting. It's about 0.11 strokes putting. But he's been, decent off the tee, gaining 0.3, gaining 0.1 on approach, 0.1 around the greens. Just an overall really solid player. And he really distinguishes himself from a lot of these other low 6K guys. He does have the weapon off the tee. We've seen him gain 4 or 5 strokes off the tee in events. And overall, I really like his floor. He's been making cuts. He showed the potential at the Players. He cracked the top 5 for a little bit. And I think he's a great cash play. He's a solid flyer and somebody I'll be putting in a few GPP lineups this week. Yeah, and that's all I have for this week, guys. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments who you guys have winning this year's Charles Schwab Challenge. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed the content. And I'll see you guys next week.